A queen once had her own husband imprisoned to keep her crown. Another was officially crowned king because the title of queen regnant was unheard of in her land. And one mastermind ruler stitched together 3 rival kingdoms into a colossal northern empire. Picture this. You inherit a throne, only to find yourself at war with your brand new husband, or your own son tries to kick you out of power. These aren't make-believe stories. They're the jaw-dropping realities faced by medieval queens who didn't just sit on thrones. They fought for them, ruled with iron wills, and their lives were a whirlwind of power plays, daring escapes, and nation-building. Number 9. The teen king who sacrificed her love for her kingdom, Jadwiga of Poland. Jadwiga, born around 1373 or 1374, wasn't just any princess. She was the daughter of Louis the Great, King of Hungary and Poland. Her early life was one of privilege and preparation for a significant royal marriage. She was cultured, intelligent, and by all accounts deeply devout. But her world was turned upside down when her father died in 1382 without a male heir for Poland. Her older sister Mary was set to inherit Hungary, leaving young Jadwiga barely a child as the designated ruler for Poland. Now the Polish nobles were too keen on being ruled by Mary's husband, Sigismund of Luxembourg, whom they disliked. So they looked to Jadwiga. There was a catch, though. To solidify her claim and prevent any challenge based on her gender, the Polish nobility decided she wouldn't be crowned queen, but King Hedwig Rex Polonii. This wasn't just a symbolic gesture. It was a powerful statement that she held the full authority of a monarch, not merely the power of a queen consort. She arrived in Poland in 1384, a girl of about 10, and was crowned in Krakow. Even before her coronation, Jadwiga's life was entangled in high-stakes, marital politics. She had been betrothed since childhood to William, a young Habsburg Duke of Austria. Sources suggest this was a genuine youthful affection. William even traveled to Krakow in 1385, hoping to consummate the marriage and secure his position. But the Polish lords had other plans. They saw a far greater strategic advantage in an alliance with the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, Poland's large pagan eastern neighbor. The Lithuanian Grand Duke, Jogaila, was willing to convert to Catholicism, marry Jadwiga, and unite his vast territories with Poland. This offered Poland security against the Teutonic Knights and the prospect of Christianizing a huge pagan population. Poor Jadwiga, barely a teenager, was caught in the middle. She reportedly wept and resisted the idea of giving up William for Jogaila, a man she had never met and who was much older. Legends say she even tried to flee the walled castle with an axe to break open the gates, only to be persuaded by a wise old courtier that her personal happiness was secondary to the good of her kingdom. Whether the axe story is true or not, the pressure on her was immense. Ultimately, she consented to the political marriage. In 1386, Jogaila was baptized, taking the Christian name Ladislaw, married Jadwiga, and was crowned King of Poland, ruling jointly with her. Jadwiga, though young, wasn't a passive bystander. She actively participated in the governance of the kingdom. She was known for her diplomatic skills, mediating disputes between nobles and even between her husband and his rivals. She personally led expeditions to Ruthenia to reclaim territories for Poland. She was deeply involved in promoting culture and learning, most famously by donating her personal jewels to restore and expand the University of Krakow, which became known as the Jagiellonian University, one of Europe's great centers of learning. Jadwiga was also renowned for her piety and charity. She founded hospitals, supported churches, and was said to care deeply for the poor. Her personal life, however, remained a subject of some sadness. The marriage to Jogaila, while politically successful, wasn't necessarily a love match for her. Tragically, her life was cut short. In June 1399, she gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth Bonifacia, but the baby died within a month. Jadwiga herself died a few days later from complications of childbirth, only in her mid-20s. Her death was a profound shock to Poland. Though her reign was relatively short, her impact was enormous. She had secured the Polish-Lithuanian Union, a powerhouse in Eastern Europe for centuries, and left a legacy of piety, wisdom, and sacrifice that led to her eventual canonization as a saint in the Catholic Church. Number 8. The mastermind who united Scandinavia and ruled an empire without a crown for a while. Margaret I of Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. Margaret, born in 1353, was the daughter of King Valdemar IV of Denmark, a ruler known for his cunning and ruthlessness in restoring Danish power. From a young age, Margaret was a pawn in the complex game of Scandinavian politics. At just 6 years old, she was betrothed to King Håkon VI of Norway, who also had a claim to the Swedish throne. They married when she was 10. This wasn't a fairy tale. It was a strategic alliance designed to consolidate power. Margaret quickly learned the art of politics in a region constantly simmering with conflict between Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, often complicated by the interference of powerful German Hanseatic League cities. Her life took a decisive turn when her father, Valdemar IV, died in 1375 without a direct male heir. Margaret, astute and ambitious, moved swiftly. She secured the election of her young son Olaf as King of Denmark, with herself as regent. When her husband, Håkon VI, died in 1380, Olaf also inherited the Norwegian throne, making Margaret regent of Norway as well. Suddenly, at 27, she was effectively ruling two kingdoms. Tragedy struck in 1387, when Olaf, still a teenager, died unexpectedly. This could have been a disaster for Margaret, potentially ending her authority. But she was too smart and too well entrenched for that. The Danish nobility quickly recognized her as regent of Denmark, and Norway followed suit, acknowledging her as their mighty lady and master. She wasn't officially queen regnant yet in name, but she held all the power. Her ambitions didn't stop there. Sweden was in turmoil, with unpopular King Albert of Mecklenburg facing strong opposition from his own nobles. They looked to Margaret for help. In 1388, the Swedish magnates formally elected her as their regent. Margaret raised an army, and in 1389, her forces defeated King Albert at the Battle of Falköping, capturing him and his son. This victory effectively made her the ruler of Sweden too, though Stockholm held out for several more years. With Denmark, Norway, and Sweden under her control, Margaret set about formalizing this union. Her grand vision culminated in the Union of Kalmar in 1397. At a great assembly in the Swedish city of Kalmar, her grandnephew Eric of Pomerania was crowned king of all three Scandinavian kingdoms. Margaret, however, remained the true power behind the throne until her death. She had adopted Eric and carefully groomed him, but she kept a firm grip on the reins of government. She never formally took the title of Queen Regnant of the United Realms, preferring to rule through Eric, but everyone knew who was really in charge. Margaret was a formidable ruler. She worked tirelessly to centralize power, reclaim crown lands that had been lost to nobles, reform the currency, and strengthen royal administration across her vast domain. She was a shrewd diplomat, preferring negotiation and political maneuvering to outright war, though she wasn't afraid to use force when necessary. She aimed to create a strong, unified Scandinavian bloc, capable of resisting German influence, particularly from the Hanseatic League. She was known for her intelligence, her determination, and her ability to command loyalty. Some called her the Semiramis of the North, comparing her to the legendary Assyrian queen. Others, particularly those whose power she curbed, saw her as ruthless. She spent her final years consolidating the Kalmar Union, though tensions between the three kingdoms, particularly Sweden's desire for more autonomy, were already apparent. Margaret died of the plague in 1412, aboard her ship in Flensburg Fjord, while negotiating with Holstein. She had achieved something remarkable, the unification, however fragile, of Scandinavia under a single ruler, a union that would last in various forms for over a century. She did it all through sheer political will, astute maneuvering, and an unwavering focus on her goals, effectively ruling an empire without ever being officially crowned its sole monarch. Number 7. The golden-haired queen, accused of murder and betrayed by her own family, Joanna I of Naples. Joanna I, born around 1326, was destined for a life of drama. She was the granddaughter of the wise King Robert of Naples, a respected figure in European politics. When Robert died in 1343, Joanna, a teenager of about 17, inherited the prosperous kingdom of Naples, as well as titles like Queen of Jerusalem and Countess of Provence and Forcalquier. King Robert, perhaps foreseeing trouble, had stipulated that she should marry her cousin Andrew of Hungary. Andrew was also a descendant of Neapolitan royalty, and the marriage was meant to heal old family rifts. The marriage, however, was a disaster from the start. Andrew was young, ambitious, and backed by a powerful Hungarian faction at court, including his formidable mother, Elizabeth of Poland. He demanded to be crowned king in his own right, not just as Joanna's consort. Joanna, described as beautiful, intelligent, and pleasure-loving, resisted. The Neapolitan court was a sophisticated, cultured place, influenced by French traditions, and many local nobles resented the boorish Hungarian presence and Andrew's political ambitions. Tensions ran incredibly high. Then came the night of September 18th, 1345. Andrew was murdered at a hunting lodge in Aversa. He was attacked, strangled, and thrown from a balcony. The scandal was immediate and immense. Suspicion quickly fell on those closest to Joanna, including some of her relatives and confidants. Joanna herself was accused by many, especially Andrew's enraged brother, King Louis I of Hungary, of having orchestrated or at least condoned the murder. Whether she was truly guilty remains one of history's great unsolved mysteries. She was pregnant at the time with Andrew's child, a son named Charles Martel, who would die young. Louis of Hungary vowed revenge. He invaded Naples in 1347, seeking to depose Joanna and claim the throne. Joanna, facing overwhelming force, was forced to flee. She went to Avignon, the seat of the papacy at the time, to plead her case before Pope Clement VI. In a remarkable turn of events, she was formally tried for the murder of her husband and, after a compelling defense, was acquitted by the Pope. To secure papal support and raise funds, she sold her rights to the city of Avignon to the papacy. Joanna eventually managed to return to Naples, but her reign was far from stable. She married 3 more times after Andrew. Her second husband was Louis of Taranto, another cousin, with whom she had a more successful partnership until his death. Her third was James IV of Majorca, and her fourth was Otto, Duke of Brunswick-Grubenhagen. None of these marriages produced a surviving heir to secure the succession, which became a constant source of political instability. Her kingdom was plagued by internal strife among powerful noble families, mercenary companies running rampant, and the ongoing threat from Hungary. She also became deeply entangled in the Western Schism, the period when multiple claimants vied for the papacy. Joanna initially supported Pope Urban VI in Rome, but their relationship soured. She then switched her allegiance to the rival Pope Clement VII in Avignon. This was a fateful decision. Urban VI, furious at her defection, excommunicated Joanna in 1380, declared her deposed, and offered her kingdom to her cousin, Charles of Durazzo. Charles, who Joanna had once considered her heir before adopting Louis I of Anjou instead, readily accepted the Pope's offer. He invaded Naples with a Hungarian army. Joanna, besieged in Castel Nuovo, was eventually captured in 1381. Otto of Brunswick fought to save her, but was defeated and imprisoned. Her end was grim. After nearly a year of captivity, Joanna I was assassinated in the summer of 1382 in the castle of Muro Lucano, likely strangled on Charles of Durazzo's orders. She was around 56 years old. Her long and turbulent reign, which had begun with such promise, ended in betrayal and violence. She ruled for almost 4 decades, navigating treacherous political waters, but ultimately fell victim to the ambitions of her own relatives and the brutal power politics of the era. Number 6. The Queen who funded Columbus, waged war, and forged a nation. Isabella, the First of Castile. Isabella I, born in 1451 in the aptly named Madrigal de las Altas Torres, Madrigal of the High Towers, didn't have an easy path to the throne. She was the daughter of John II of Castile, but her early life was spent in relative obscurity after her father's death, when she was just 3. Her much older half-brother, Henry IV, became king, and Henry's reign was notoriously unstable, plagued by rebellious nobles and questions about his own legitimacy, and that of his declared heir, his daughter Joanna, nicknamed La Belle Tournaiche, due to rumors that her real father, Isabella, and her younger brother Alfonso became focal points for nobles opposing Henry. After Alfonso died young, the rebellious faction looked to Isabella. She was intelligent, strong-willed, and deeply religious. Crucially, she refused to be a mere pawn. When Henry IV tried to arrange politically advantageous marriages for her, she resisted, holding out for a match that would strengthen her own position. In 1469, against Henry's wishes, Isabella made a secret and daring decision. She married Ferdinand, heir to the throne of Aragon. This was a politically explosive move. Their marriage was technically illegal without a papal dispensation because they were second cousins, though they later obtained a possibly forged, then later legitimized, one. When Henry IV died in 1474, Isabella immediately had herself proclaimed Queen of Castile in Segovia. This act ignited the War of the Castilian Succession. Joanna la Beltranea, backed by her husband King Afonso V of Portugal and a faction of Castilian nobles, contested Isabella's claim. The war was brutal and lasted for several years. Isabella was actively involved, sometimes even appearing near battlefields to inspire her troops. She proved to be a determined and capable leader. With Ferdinand's military prowess and her own political acumen, they gradually gained the upper hand. The war finally ended in 1479. The same year, Ferdinand became King of Aragon. Though they ruled their respective kingdoms separately, Isabella and Ferdinand, known as the Catholic monarchs, worked in remarkably close partnership. Their motto, Tanto Monta, Monta Tanto, Isabel Come, Fernando, roughly meant they amount to the same Isabella as much as Ferdinand, signifying their equal authority, though in Castile, Isabella held primary royal power. Isabella's reign was brief for Spain. She was focused on centralizing royal power, reforming the administration of justice, and reducing the influence of the unruly nobility. One of her most significant and controversial policies was the establishment of the Spanish Inquisition in 1478, initially aimed at ensuring the sincerity of conversos, Jews who had converted to Christianity. This later expanded, leading to persecution and intolerance. Another major goal was the completion of the Reconquista, the centuries-long effort to reclaim the Iberian Peninsula from Muslim rule. In 1492, after a long siege, the Emirates of Granada, the last Muslim stronghold, fell to Castilian forces. This was a monumental event for Isabella and Ferdinand. The same year, 1492, brought two other momentous occurrences. First, the Alhambra decree ordered the expulsion or forced conversion of all Jews from Spain. Second, Isabella agreed to finance the voyage of an obscure Genoese sailor named Christopher Columbus, who proposed to reach the East Indies by sailing west. His discovery of the Americas would profoundly change the world and bring immense wealth and vast territories to Castile. Isabella was a complex figure. She was deeply pious, even austere in her personal life, yet capable of ruthless political decisions. She was a patron of learning and the arts, but also oversaw policies that led to immense suffering. She had several children with Ferdinand, including Joanna, known as the Mad and Catherine of Aragon, future first wife of Henry VIII of England. Isabella's later years were marked by personal tragedies, including the deaths of her only son and heir, Juan, and her eldest daughter, Isabella, Queen of Portugal. She died in 1504, having laid the foundations for a unified Spain and a global empire. Her will emphasized her desire for Castilian integrity and outlined the succession, underscoring her lifelong dedication to her kingdom. She remains one of the most powerful and affable female rulers in history. Number 5. The Queen who ruled for a hot minute but checkmated everyone. Berengaria of Castile. Berengaria, born around 1179 or 1180, was a royal figure deeply enmeshed in the intricate web of Iberian Christian kingdoms. She was the eldest daughter of Alfonso VIII of Castile and Eleanor of England, who herself was a daughter of the formidable Eleanor of Aquitaine and Henry II of England. This made Berengaria a granddaughter of two of the most powerful women of the 12th century, and she certainly inherited some of their political savvy. Her early life was shaped by the constant political maneuvering and marital alliances between the Iberian realms. In 1197, Berengaria was married to her cousin, King Alfonso IX of Leon. This marriage was intended to bring peace between Castile and Leon, two kingdoms that were often at odds. Together, they had 5 children, including a son, Ferdinand, the future Ferdinand III, who would play a crucial role in Spanish history. However, the marriage was problematic from a religious standpoint. Pope Innocent III objected to it on the grounds of consanguinity. They were too closely related. Despite the political advantages and the birth of several children, the Pope remained firm, placing Leon under an interdict and eventually annulling the marriage in 1204. Berengaria returned to Castile with her children. Though her marriage was over, she remained a key political player. Her status as the mother of Alfonso IX's heir, Ferdinand, gave her considerable influence. She was intelligent, and her father, Alfonso VIII, clearly trusted her judgment, involving her in state affairs. When Alfonso VIII died in 1214, Berengaria's younger brother, Henry I, became king. Henry was only a child, around 10 years old, so a regency was needed. Initially, their mother, Eleanor of England, was regent, but she died shortly after her husband. Berengaria then became regent for her young brother. This was not an easy task. The Castilian nobility was fractious, particularly the powerful Lara family, who sought to control the young king and the regency. Berengaria faced significant opposition and political intrigue. She skillfully navigated these challenges, always working to protect her brother's rights and the stability of the kingdom. Tragedy struck in 1217. Young King Henry I died in an accident. He was hit by a falling tile while playing with other children in Palencia. He was only about 13 and had no children. This sudden death threw Castile into a succession crisis. According to Castilian succession law, Berengaria, as Henry's oldest surviving sibling, was now the rightful queen of Castile. And this is where Berengaria made a truly remarkable and strategic move. She was proclaimed Queen of Castile. She held the throne in her own right, but she knew that her position as a sole female ruler could be challenged, especially with her ex-husband, Alfonso IX of Leon, potentially trying to claim Castile for himself or one of their other children. So, almost immediately after being recognized as Queen, Berengaria did something extraordinary. She abdicated. Within a few months, she formally renounced the throne in favor of her son, Ferdinand. This wasn't an act of weakness. It was a masterstroke of political calculation. By abdicating in favor of Ferdinand, who was already a young man with a strong claim through both his parents, she ensured a smooth transition of power, preempted potential civil war, and united the Castilian nobles behind a male ruler. It also set the stage for an even greater achievement. Though she was no longer queen regnant, Berengaria remained Ferdinand's most trusted advisor, and a dominant political force in Castile for the rest of her life. She guided him, managed alliances, and helped him navigate the complex political landscape. Her influence was crucial when her ex-husband, Alfonso IX of Leon, died in 1230. Alfonso IX had attempted to disinherit Ferdinand from the Leonese throne in favor of his daughters from an earlier marriage. But Berengaria stepped in. She negotiated skillfully with the daughter's mother and secured the Kingdom of Leon for Ferdinand. This led to the permanent union of Castile and Leon under Ferdinand III, creating one of the most powerful Christian kingdoms in Iberia, a crucial step towards the eventual formation of Spain. Berengaria continued to support her son's reign, which was marked by significant advances in the Reconquista. She died in 1246, having played a pivotal, if sometimes behind-the-scenes role in shaping the future of Spain. She was queen for only a very short time, but her political intelligence and strategic decisions had a lasting impact far beyond her brief direct rule. Number 4. The king who brought a golden age and crushed all her enemies, Tamar of Georgia. Tamar, born around 1160, was the daughter of King George III of Georgia. In a move that was quite unusual for the time, her father decided to make her his co-ruler and heir while he was still alive. In 1178, when Tamar was probably around 18, George III officially crowned her as his co-monarch, ensuring a smoother transition and accustoming the powerful Georgian nobility to the idea of a female ruler. When George III died in 1184, Tamar became the sole monarch of Georgia. However, her accession wasn't without challenges. Some nobles saw an opportunity to increase their own power at the expense of the young queen. They demanded concessions and sought to limit royal authority. Tamar, though young, proved to be a shrewd and decisive ruler. She initially made some compromises but gradually consolidated her power, often with the support of loyal factions within the church and nobility. One of the most significant aspects of her rule was her title. She was consistently referred to as Mape, the Georgian word for king, not queen. This emphasized her status as a monarch, ruling in her own right with the full sovereign powers associated with the king. Her personal life was also intertwined with state affairs. The nobles pressed her to marry to secure an heir and provide a military leader. Her first marriage, arranged around 1185, was to Yuri Bokoyubsky, a Russ's prince. This union proved disastrous. Yuri was reportedly a difficult and abusive husband, and he was also a poor military commander. Tamar, with the support of her court, took the bold step of divorcing him after about 2 years. Yuri, however, didn't go quietly. He gathered supporters and launched 2 rebellions in an attempt to reclaim his position. But Tamar's forces decisively defeated him both times. Her second marriage, around 1191, was to David Soslin, an Alan prince. This was a much more successful partnership. David was a skilled military leader who loyally supported Tamar and commanded her armies with great success. Together, they had 2 children, George, the future King George IV, Lasha, and Rusudan, who would also rule as queen. Tamar's reign is widely considered the Golden Age of medieval Georgia. Under her leadership, the kingdom reached the zenith of its power and cultural development. Militarily, Georgia was a dominant force in the Caucasus. Tamar's armies, often led by David Soslan and other brilliant generals, like the Zacharian brothers, won a series of stunning victories against neighboring Muslim states. They expanded Georgian territory, securing its borders and extending its influence over a vast area, from parts of modern-day Armenia and Azerbaijan to the North Caucasus. In 1204, Tamar's forces even established the Empire of Trebizond on the southern coast of the Black Sea, which became a Georgian protectorate. She wasn't just a warrior queen. Tamar was a great patron of arts, culture, and religion. Monasteries and churches were built and lavishly decorated during her reign. Literature flourished with epic poems like Shota Rustaveli's The Knight in the Panther's Skin, being written during this period, often dedicated to or inspired by the queen. She was known for her piety, her wisdom, and her justice. Chroniclers praised her for her compassion and her ability to govern effectively. She skillfully managed the powerful nobility, often through a combination of diplomacy and firm assertion of royal authority. She convened church councils and was deeply involved in religious affairs. Tamar maintained a sophisticated court and engaged in diplomacy with both Christian and Muslim powers. Her reputation extended far beyond Georgia's borders. She was seen as a powerful and just Christian ruler in a region of great strategic importance. Tamar died in 1213, though the exact circumstances and her burial place are shrouded in legend and mystery, which only adds to her mystique. Some stories say she was buried in a secret location to prevent her tomb from being desecrated. She left behind a strong, prosperous, and culturally vibrant kingdom. Though Georgia would face immense challenges in the centuries after her death, particularly from Mongol invasions, the legacy of King Tamar and her golden age remains a source of immense national pride in Georgia to this day. She stands as one of the most successful and revered monarchs in the country's history. Number 3. The Duchess, who became queen of two countries and defied them both. Eleanor of Aquitaine. Eleanor of Aquitaine, born around 1122, was no ordinary noblewoman. She was the heiress to the vast Duchy of Aquitaine in southwestern France, a territory richer and larger than the personal lands of the French king himself. When her father, Duke William X, died in 1137, Eleanor, at about 15, became Duchess of Aquitaine in her own right. Her father, on his deathbed, had entrusted her to the guardianship of King Louis VI of France, who promptly married her off to his own son and heir, also named Louis, the future Louis VII. Within weeks of her father's death, Eleanor was married, and shortly after, King Louis VI died, making her teenage husband King of France and Eleanor Queen. Eleanor was not a demure, retiring queen. She was spirited, intelligent, and accustomed to the more vibrant and cultured court of Aquitaine. The Parisian court was, by comparison, rather austere. Her marriage to Louis VII was not a happy one. He was devout and monkish, while Eleanor was worldly and assertive. She famously accompanied him on the disastrous Second Crusade, 1147 to 1149. Her presence, along with her retinue of ladies and baggage wagons, caused considerable comment and was blamed by some for the Crusade's failures. There were also rumors of inappropriate conduct on her part during the Crusade, particularly with her uncle Raymond of Poitiers, Prince of Antioch. These incidents, true or exaggerated, further strained her relationship with Louis. Crucially, after more than a decade of marriage, Eleanor had only produced 2 daughters with Louis Jadwiga. The lack of a male heir was a serious concern for the French monarchy. Citing consanguinity, they were distant cousins. The marriage was annulled in 1152. Aquitaine, which had been linked to the French crown through Eleanor, reverted to her sole control. Eleanor didn't remain single for long. Just weeks after the annulment, in a move that shocked Europe and infuriated Louis VII, she married Henry Plantagenet, Duke of Normandy and Count of Anjou. Henry was 11 years younger than her, energetic, ambitious, and most importantly, a major rival to the French king. 2 years later, in 1154, Henry became King Henry II of England. Eleanor was now Queen of England, while still Duchess of Aquitaine. Her territories, combined with Henry's, created a vast Angevin empire that stretched from Scotland to the Pyrenees, dwarfing the lands directly controlled by the King of France. Her marriage to Henry II was initially passionate and produced many children, including 8, who survived infancy. 5 sons: William, who died young, Henry the Young King, Richard the Lionheart, Geoffrey of Brittany, and John Lackland, and 3 daughters. However, this marriage also became incredibly stormy. Henry was a dynamic but ruthless and unfaithful husband. Eleanor, never one to be sidelined, asserted her rights, particularly in Aquitaine, where she often ruled directly. As their sons grew older, tensions within the family escalated. Eleanor actively supported her sons, Henry the Young King, Richard and Geoffrey, in their great rebellion against their father, Henry II, in 1173 to 1174. She even tried to flee to the court of her ex-husband, Louis VII, in Paris, but was captured by Henry's forces. For her role in the rebellion, Henry II had Eleanor imprisoned. She spent the next 16 years in various castles in England and Normandy, sometimes under strict confinement, sometimes with more freedom, but always under guard. Her fortunes changed dramatically when Henry II died in 1189. Her favorite son, Richard I, the Lionheart, became King of England. One of Richard's first acts was to free his mother. Eleanor, now in her late 60s, re-emerged onto the political stage with renewed vigor. While Richard was away on the Third Crusade and later held captive in Germany, Eleanor played a crucial role in governing England as regent, raising his enormous ransom and thwarting the plots of her youngest son John, who tried to seize power. She continued to be a dominant force even during John's reign after Richard's death in 1199. Well into her 70s, and even her 80s, she traveled extensively, arranged political marriages for her grandchildren, and fiercely defended her ancestral lands in Aquitaine. She outlived most of her children. Eleanor of Aquitaine died in 1204 at the remarkable age of around 82 at Fontefraud Abbey, where she was buried alongside Henry II and Richard I. Her life spanned almost the entire 12th century, a period of immense change, and she was one of its most extraordinary and influential figures, a duchess in her own right and queen of 2 kingdoms, who shaped the political map of Europe. Number 2. The Crusader queen who ruled Jerusalem and citadelled her own son, Melisende of Jerusalem. Melisende, born in 1105 in Edessa, was the eldest daughter of Baldwin of Bork, who would later become King Baldwin II of Jerusalem. In the Crusader states, where life was precarious and male heirs often died young, succession through the female line was more accepted than in many parts of Europe. Baldwin II had 4 daughters, but no sons. He therefore designated Melisende as his heir. This was a significant decision, making her the future queen of Jerusalem in her own right. To secure her position and provide a strong military leader for the kingdom, Baldwin II arranged for Melisende to marry Fulk V, Count of Anjou, a powerful and experienced widower from France. They married in 1129, and Baldwin II stipulated that Melisende, Fulk, and their future son would rule jointly. When Baldwin II died in 1131, Melisende and Fulk ascended to the throne as joint rulers of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Their first son, the future Baldwin III, was born in 1130. Initially, Fulk, with the support of some of his Angevin knights, tried to sideline Melisende and rule alone. He excluded her from government affairs and showed her little public respect. This was a miscalculation. Melisende was not a passive consort. She was the hereditary queen. She had strong support among the established nobility of Jerusalem, many of whom resented Fulk's attempts to monopolize power and favor his own followers. Tensions grew, and according to the chronicler William of Tyre, the court became divided. There was even a scandal involving an alleged affair between Melisende and Hugh II of Lupuzet, Count of Jaffa, a powerful vassal who then rebelled against Fulk. Though Hugh was defeated, the incident highlighted the risks at court and Fulk's precarious position if he alienated his wife. Realizing his mistake and the strength of Melisende's position, Fulk reconciled with her. From about 1136 onwards, Melisende's name began to appear again on official charters, and she visibly resumed her role as co-ruler. She took an active part in day-to-day governance, in legal matters, and in patronage. She was known for her intelligence, her piety, and her patronage of the arts and the church. The famous Melisende Psalter, a beautifully illuminated manuscript, was likely commissioned for her. When Fulk died in a hunting accident in 1143, their son Baldwin III was only 13 years old. Melisende became regent for her young son, but she ruled not just as a regent, but as queen in her own right, based on her hereditary claim and the earlier decrees of her father. She governed effectively, with the support of key figures like the Constable Manasses of Herages. She managed the kingdom's defenses, its finances, and its complex diplomatic relations with other Crusader states, Byzantium, and neighboring Muslim powers. This was a challenging time, as the Muslim states under leaders like Zengi were growing stronger, culminating in the fall of Edessa in 1144, which triggered the Second Crusade. As Baldwin III came of age, he naturally wanted to rule alone. He reached his majority in 1145, but Melisende was reluctant to relinquish her authority. She had been ruling effectively for years and saw herself as the senior monarch. For several years, they ruled jointly, but tensions mounted. Baldwin felt his mother was deliberately excluding him from power. By 1152, the situation reached a crisis point. Baldwin III demanded a formal division of the kingdom, or his coronation as sole ruler. Melisende initially resisted. The Haute Cour, High Court of Jerusalem intervened and decided to divide the kingdom. Baldwin would rule the northern part, Acre and Tyre, and Melisende would retain Jerusalem and Nablus in the south. This arrangement, however, was unworkable and didn't last. Baldwin, unhappy with the division, soon marched on Jerusalem. He besieged his mother in the Tower of David. After a brief struggle, Melisende was forced to surrender. Baldwin III became the undisputed ruler, but he was astute enough not to completely alienate his mother. Melisende formally retired from active political life, but retained significant influence and the lordship of Nablus. Baldwin often consulted her on important matters of state, and she continued her patronage of the church. She was a respected figure, and her experience was valued. Melisende died in 1161, after suffering a stroke. She had ruled Jerusalem as queen for 3 decades, first with her husband, then as regent and queen for her son, and finally in a tense co-rule that ended in conflict. Despite the eventual power struggle with Baldwin III, her reign was a period of relative stability and cultural flourishing for the Kingdom of Jerusalem. She was a formidable woman who successfully navigated the treacherous politics of the Crusader states and asserted her right to rule in a male-dominated world. Number 1. The Queen, who battled husbands, her own son, and a very angry Pope, Ulrica of Leon and Castile. Ulrica, born in 1081, was the daughter of Alfonso VI of Leon and Castile, a powerful king famous for his wars against the Almoravids and his legendary association with El Cid. Ulrica's early life was marked by the complex succession politics of her father's realm. Alfonso VI had several wives and numerous children, but his only son and heir, Sancho, died in battle in 1108. This unexpected death catapulted Ulrica, then in her late 20s and already a widow from her first marriage to Raymond of Burgundy, with whom she had a son, the future Alfonso VII, into the position of heir presumptive to the vast United Kingdom of Leon and Castile. When Alfonso VI died in 1109, Ulrica became queen regnant. She was the first woman in European history to rule such a significant Christian Iberian kingdom in her own name. However, her father, perhaps concerned about a lone woman ruling in such turbulent times, had arranged on his deathbed for her to marry Alfonso I, King of Aragon and Navarre, known as the Battler. This marriage was intended to unite the Christian kingdoms against the Almoravid threat and provide a strong military leader. The marriage, which took place shortly after Ulrica's accession, was an unmitigated disaster. Both Ulrica and Alfonso the Battler were strong-willed, autocratic individuals. Alfonso of Aragon expected to rule Castile and Leon by right of his wife, while Ulrica was determined to preserve her own royal authority and the inheritance of her son, Alfonso Raymondez, the future Alfonso VII. Clashes were immediate and violent. Alfonso the Battler was known for his military prowess, but also for his harshness and lack of diplomatic skill. He alienated many of the Leonese and Castilian nobles who were loyal to Ulrica. The situation quickly degenerated into open civil war between husband and wife. Ulrica led her own factions, raised armies, and actively fought against her husband. She accused him of cruelty and of trying to usurp her power. There were battles, sieges, and constant political maneuvering. At one point, Alfonso the Battler even had Ulrica imprisoned, but she managed to escape or was released by her supporters. She was a queen who literally went to war to defend her crown from her own spouse. adding to the chaos. Urraca also faced challenges from other quarters. Her half-sister, Teresa, who ruled Portugal, tried to expand her own territories at Leon's expense. And crucially, Urraca's own son, Alfonso Raymondez, became a rallying point for Galician nobles who opposed both Urraca's marriage to the Aragonese king and, at times, Urraca herself. As young Alfonso grew older, he increasingly asserted his own claims, sometimes in alliance with his mother, sometimes in opposition to her, depending on the shifting political landscape. Urraca also had a complicated personal life. She took lovers, most notably Count Pedro González de Lara, with whom she had illegitimate children. This further scandalized some conservative elements of the clergy and nobility and gave her enemies ammunition. The Pope, Paschal II, eventually annulled her marriage to Alfonso the Battler around 1114 on grounds of consanguinity. They were distant cousins, much to Urraca's relief, though Alfonso the Battler refused to accept the annulment for some time and continued to interfere in Leonese Castilian affairs. Even after the de facto end of her marriage, Urraca's reign remained tumultuous. She had to constantly fight to maintain her authority against rebellious nobles, the ambitions of her ex-husband, and the growing power of her son, Alfonso. She showed remarkable resilience and political skill, forming alliances, negotiating truces, and leading military campaigns. She was determined to pass on her kingdoms intact to her legitimate heir. Despite the constant warfare and political instability, Urraca managed to hold on to her throne. She gradually outmaneuvered Alfonso the Battler, forcing him to largely withdraw to Aragon. She also navigated the complex relationship with her son. By the early 1120s, young Alfonso VII was increasingly recognized as her co-ruler or successor, particularly in Galicia and then Castile. Urraca died in 1126, possibly from complications of childbirth, while still relatively young in her mid-40s. Her son, Alfonso VII, succeeded her and became known as the Emperor. Urraca's reign was a period of almost constant turmoil, but she achieved her primary goal. She defended her inheritance and passed it on to her son. She was a truly pioneering figure, a queen who ruled in an age that had little precedent for female sovereignty on such a scale, and she did so with incredible tenacity, fighting literally and figuratively for every inch of her power. Her story is a raw and dramatic example of the challenges faced by a medieval queen regnant.